Good morning, and thank you for joining us. This is Sunrise, and I am Alero.
And I'm Neota Igbe. I couldn't wait for her to finish. It's been a hectic week. Yes, Alero, you know the federal government imposed a curfew, 8 to 6 a.m. 8 p.m.
8 p.m. to 6 p.m. 6 a.m.
But I don't get it.
Oh, okay.
I don't get
what
us.
don't
No,
you?
I don't get it. I get the curfew.
Okay.
But I don't get us.
Okay.
So, you know, the entrance into Lagos and Ogun is on the same road. It is
Our road.
It's a madhouse. But you know the funny thing?
I saw it this morning, and I was told it was because of the curfew.
The tie back. So I just begin to wonder, what are you doing? You've been told 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., stay in. But no, they will carry themselves to that point and
Park there till morning.
All manner of trucks, all manner of containers will park. And then you find some small cars in between them. Where are you going to?
Those who have a death wish.
And then guess what? That's from Lagos. Ogun State has a total lockdown. After the federal government eased their lockdown imposed, the state government in Ogun said, total lockdown. We need to monitor and curb the spread. Yet, people will still be, and every state has a border closed.
Exactly. And people are still
individuals,
able to travel. And even though there were videos of law enforcement who were compromised, we haven't heard a word from their bosses. They haven't made any statements, nothing. So, of course, this is still going on. People are still crossing state borders and carrying this virus with them.
Alero, and the funny thing is, you might not even know you're carrying the virus.
That is the most dangerous part of this story.
So why don't you just stay where you... Oh, but the fortunate... I don't like using unfortunate. The fortunate thing is that some people live in Ogun State but work in Lagos. And they have to go to work. So the question is, where do you draw the line? Where do you... Do you call your bosses and say, see where I live?
I'm going to be late.
I'm going to be late, or can I be excused because Ogun State is still on lockdown? Can I work from home? I mean, that's an option that can be taken. But at the end of the day, if we all come together and agree that this is what we want to do. Now, there are so many people who are having one issue or the other. Is it real? Is it not real? My friend once said something to me. He said, if I tell you this fire is real and you stay away, if at the end of the day you find out that it's not real, you will have still been saved. But what if I tell you it is real, and then you say, no it's not real, and you go, and you find out that it is real, you will be burnt. So please, why don't we just... Because... I don't know, Alero.
I know someone told me something last week. I mean... somebody who lives in Adebusoye says, well, in that area, they don't believe that there's anything like COVID-19. The government is just using it to collect money. Every time they see isolation centers, when they see the videos on TV, it's of people dancing and generally walking around. They have not seen anybody who's ill.
Okay.
And I said, this is a very unfortunate story, because indeed, I don't think we have been shown the video of anybody or the clip of anybody who's really ill from the virus.
Alero.
So that we can believe. You know how Nigerians are. Seeing is believing.
Alero.
To a point where people are washing their dirty hands
and
drinking the water.
Just before we go to the menu, Alero, I have seen 2 people who recovered from this virus. 2. And their story
is not one that
you wish. It's not a palatable one.
Yes.
One of them said, Nelta, I saw, please forgive my language here, I saw a grown-ass man both pissing and shitting on himself. It is not funny. 2,
oh God,
I have seen them, I've spoken with them. It is better, whether you believe it or not, just stay home. Wear your mask
Or
if you
stay
must come
safe.
out. Carry whatever, be precautious, whatever
Yes.
way you want to do it, but please be safe, whether you believe it or not. When they tell you it has cleared, come out and continue with your life as normal. But for now,
Stay safe.
thank you.
We had Mrs. Dafinone telling us her experience. I think that was about a week or so ago. And if that is not enough for us to know that this thing is real and to protect ourselves, then I don't know what will. Yes, we're going to open with poverty index in the COVID-19 era.
Then we'll get to talk about small-scale farmers and the COVID-19. All of this is at the end of COVID-19. What next?
Then we'll be looking at the 2020 African Vaccination Week.
Yeah. And then we'll get to talk about the family. You know, is it this week there's a family week?
International Day of Families,
It's
yes.
National Day of Family, 15th
And
of
then, as usual, we shall close with the Artist of the Week segment.
He is an interesting one.
Yes.
Very interesting. So
Yes, he is.
make yourself comfortable.
And it's someone that I enjoy watching.
Okay. So you get to see. But make yourself comfortable. Our Twitter handles will be on the screen. Talk to us, be a part of the conversation. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
When I call upon your name, don't fall my hand.
Welcome back. Now let's get the show on the road. In a recent report by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, NBS, about 40.01% of the total population of Nigeria are classified as poor, which means an average of 4 out of 10 people. Well, before the COVID-19, we were told that there were approximately 83 million Nigerians living below the poverty line. Those figures make you shudder, don't they? And then the COVID-19 came along. So what impact has it had on Nigeria's poverty index? That's what we're going to be looking at this morning, and it's my pleasure to welcome the Secretary General, Nigeria Network of NGOs, Mr. Adebusoye. Good morning.
Good morning.
We also expect Mr. Aprea of the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office to join us from Abuja in the course of this segment. So, Mr. Adebusoye, do you think that the pandemic has affected our poverty index?
Absolutely. I think, as the saying goes, that the hunger virus is even more dangerous than the coronavirus, especially in developing countries. And that's why the issue of the lockdown was such a heavy intervention for these parts, where the majority of persons are in the informal sector. So we actually need to, of course, the impact will only be known further down the line, because when evaluations are made. But even as it stands now, we've seen with the kind of inadequate palliative stimulus that have been given out by the various governments, and the rush by the people, because here they are indoors for months, actually going to months now. Many have been indoors, and there's no way of actually going out for their livelihoods. We've seen, especially persons with disabilities, who actually the most vulnerable. The United Nations mentioned that this COVID-19 thing, over 1 billion, because about 10-15% of our population are persons with disabilities, and usually there's generally no real program or plan for them. And it's not that they're all charity cases, but they do need some support to be able to even carry out their normal livelihood. So in a situation like this, we can just imagine the consequences further down the line when we do the evaluation of exactly how much impact this has had on the most vulnerable in our society.
Mr.
Just before we do that, I understand Mr. Iyowa Aprea of the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office is with us in our Abuja studio. Mr. Aprea, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, real quick, what do you think of this report by the NBS about the poverty index? 40% of Nigeria, that's about 4 in 10 Nigerians.
I think we've had that clearly from empirical evidence of research of the survey done by MBS, and not speaking for them, but that was a very rigorous process because my office, the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office under the Ministry of Federal Humanitarian Affairs, actually supported MBS in that particular piece of work, the National Living Standard Survey. So we've been involved in the planning, the methodology, and the training and the survey. So it was quite a rigorous piece of work that was done. Now, if you put that figure together against the 2010 figures that put the absolute poverty figure of Nigeria at 60%, you might say there's a bit of improvement because now it is 40%. But the methodology used in this one was a little bit different from the last one. But it does represent the figures as far as we know and as far as we can tell from the evidence that are emerging from the field, from that survey, that these figures are correct.
Well, let me come back to Mr. Adebusoye. You mentioned something in your opening salvo about the government and palliatives. Whereas we appreciate that governments, well, both at the federal and the state levels, have made an effort to, cushion the effects of the pandemic on the most vulnerable in the society. But when the federal government comes out and says that they have reached about 3 million people, then you begin to wonder, isn't there any way that this could have been done better so that more people would have been reached? If we have 83 million who are classified as poor, and you have reached only 3, you haven't even started at all.
Absolutely, and this actually exposes the lack of some structures in place. We don't have a social protection structure at federal or even state level to any substantial degree, and so this pandemic actually exposes all the weaknesses in our institutions. We are supposed to have, and we've been talking about this for in the sector for the last few years, trying to support government to ensure that we actually have a social protection floor initiative where the most vulnerable are actually protected and raised up to a particular minimum level of dignity. But that has not been implemented. We're just dragging our feet. And so when something like this comes, and unfortunately, all indication is not just going to blow over, it's going to linger for a while, it actually exposes those weaknesses. We don't have a register, a proper social register for those who are actually most vulnerable. They're supposed to be in place. There's no reason why that can be in place with technology now. I mean, we have BVNs, we have various phone numbers which you could use to trace many people. I mean, we have over 160-some million subscribers on mobile phones. We could use various ways to track the most vulnerable, but it's not happening. And so when this thing now comes up, we start scampering around. We see all the scenes of people trying to share things with a crowd, compounding even the COVID-19 risks for everyone. So we really need to, this is the time we can sit back and say, look, how do we do things differently? Let us start to build our institutions. It's when the institutions are in place that we can then begin to move to, because otherwise when an emergency comes, it's just going to expose what's on ground. We can't now start creating something from nothing, and that's actually what's happening. We need to begin to partner with various structures on ground, the religious groups, the civil society, the communities who are everywhere. The government in Abuja or in the state capitals cannot reach everyone. There's no way. And those kind of interventions lead to corruptions. We're going to hear different issues coming up. So we really need to see how they partner. Governments cannot do it alone. Partner with structures on ground, the civil society, the religious groups especially, the community-based organizations to ensure that the most vulnerable are reached at a time like this.
A partnership here. It's good that we have Mr. Aprea there. We'll still get back to him to help us understand the area of capturing the data of this most vulnerable people. But when you say we don't have a structure on ground, does it have to be a federal thing? Because he's from the federal office. What's going on with the local governments? Is there any attempt, I mean, the non-governmental organizations, for instance, is there any attempt to reach out and say, can we at least understand in this ward how many people here are vulnerable? Can that data be pulled?
Absolutely. Actually, Lagos State has some data from the Lagos State Health Management Agency. They had done an extensive survey of the most poor when they're trying to get them onto the equity fund of the Lagos State Health Insurance, where government will subsidize. So they had done quite an extensive mapping a couple of years back, and that is still in place, about 500,000 individuals or so of the extreme poor. So something is there, but it's of course needs to be, should be an ongoing process. And that's something which needs to really be encouraged across the states because, like you rightly said, it's not something we should wait for the federal. As a matter of fact, that's even part of the challenges we face, that the federal has arrogated so much power as the Father Christmas and they know it all, and they've gone beyond what they can actually do. It's actually the states that should be driving most of the initiatives for the social protection. The federal should just be regulatory and give some kind of support. The local governments.
Well, they've been very quiet. We've hardly heard anything from them since this pandemic.
Of course, there have been a few here and there we've heard doing some things, it depends on the initiative of the chairman in place. A few we've heard, to be fair, especially in Lagos. But I think it's something that should be institutionalized. We need to build institutions. So it's not just a matter of whether the chairman or the governor is up and doing, institutionalized. And that is where we need to move going forward. And this is what has been revealed, that if we don't have strong institutions, then when something happens, it will just be arbitrary. Maybe the governor is good, or maybe the chairman is nice. No, that should not be the case.
Okay, we'll take a moment. When we'll come back, Mr. Aprea, we'll look at, now that there's a social protection coordinating office, how's that working with the local government? How's that working with the institutions there? How can we institutionalize this so that we won't have this kind of situation we have that COVID has exposed, as you said? We'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Just before we get back to the conversation, some tweets came in here. Victor O says, people never believe until it hits home. People denied AIDS, Ebola, bird flu, high-density residential areas believe it's only rich folks that can get it. The people need reorientation. Yeah. But Lola Teniola says, morning. Listening to summarize now, you mentioned 2 persons you were told experienced COVID-19. Were these cases here in Nigeria? If you've been watching Channels Television, you would have noticed that we've done several stories on multiple people that were here in Nigeria that recovered from COVID-19. And we've shown several videos of the isolation centers. We did not get shots of those lying down. We're told not to take them for their own safety. But those who came out and spoke about their recovery process did that voluntarily. They came of their own accord to talk about what they've gone through. And we still continue to showcase those who have recovered and all of that. So thank you. Back to this conversation. But let me take you to Mr. Aprea. Mr. Aprea, you heard Mr. Adebusoye talk about the fact that there is no data, no social protection structure. Your office is coordinating the social safety net. That's a coordinating office. And he spoke about the fact that it's better from the bottom up. But what do we have on ground right now?
Okay, in 2015, at the coming of the President Buhari administration, the president prioritized social protection as an effective strategy of lifting Nigerians out of poverty. His campaign promised that state giving poor indigent Nigerians cash transfers. So immediately, in partnership with the World Bank, our office was created in 2016 with a World Bank facility. Now, our office started coordinating the social safety nets programs in the country, which is the National Cash Transfer Program, the Youth Employment and Social Support, and the Community and Social Development Program. All of these 3 programs are in partnership with the World Bank under various ministries. Now, the president also then created the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, which now becomes the home or the institutional home of social protection, in a bid to begin to put in place the enduring structures. Now, the minister herself, Sadiya Umar Farouk, prioritized social protection, and in the couple of days, Mr. President will receive a memo to establish the National Social Protection Council. That will be co-chaired by the Honorable Minister of Finance and the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. So those structures are there and are being built. Now, I'll come back to the bottom-up approach. Now, for the first time also in our country, the government is taking the bottom-up approach in developing structures and systems. So the social protection, the social register that we also manage has structures right through the community. So in every local government, 465 local governments so far, they have a social, the community-based targeting DEX office with a team of from 18 to 30, depending on the LGA, recruited from the local government staff in the Department of Community Development and Planning. These are the people that go to the communities to develop or raise the social register of the poor and vulnerable using what we call the community targeting system. Now, in every state of the Federation, 36 states of the Federation and Abuja, there is a state operations and coordinating unit office established in the Ministry of Planning, a unit that reports directly to the permanent secretary of that ministry. And then at the national level, of course, you have the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office reporting to the ministry as a unit in the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Now, these are structures that are actually state-based, local government-based, and community-based. The social register, unlike perhaps my colleague in the studio did mention, we have a social register of poor and vulnerable in the country. This social register is made up of 3.3 million. As of yesterday, we had 3.3 million poor and vulnerable households in the social register, made up of 13.8 million individuals across the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja, 37. 465 local governments, 61,000 communities and counting. And this register is being raised every single day as we go on. So we have the structures. We are building the structures. The National Social Register effectively is 2 years old, but it's growing every day. You have countries like Pakistan. South Africa has been there for close on to 20 years, yet their social register only about 14% coverage. So we are working. The government is working, but the government, as it's a federal structure, will depend solely on the state, where the state has the responsibility of raising these registers through their local government offices and their community structures.
Mr. Aprea, bearing in mind that Nigerians are always wary of things like this, are the people willing to be registered? And how easy has it been for your staff who are going around compiling this register?
It's been quite a task, and I commend the local government staff who have been doing this for their patients, because the way the system is structured is that there is a sensitization process that happens at the community level with the community leaders, who then mobilize all the community members to come out on a certain day. And on that set date, there is also a sensitization of the entire community. And then the community is split into 3 groups, one for the youth, one for women, and one for men. And these 3 groups then define within themselves what they understand by poverty, and in the context of the community, what then constitutes poverty, and then who are the households or families that are considered poor within that context. Now, these groups will then list these households individually, all 3 groups. Then they come back together in plenary. Now, to answer your question and the challenge, this is where some of the challenge comes. So when you bring this list together and they begin to put it together, there are some families we've had that will stand up and say, look, I'm not poor, our family is not poor. Do not put us in the poor, as poor people in this community. So you have those issues, pockets of issues, but with enough sensitization, most of the times they come back into it. But also we have the grievance redress mechanism structure set up in the community, because when the community agree on this list, they have a harmonized list that they would then select a male and a female to sign off on this list. These 2 people becomes the community grievance redress mechanism focal persons. Now, the structure is that for any other member of the community that either feels aggrieved or thinks that at the time they were compiling the names, The family didn't have a good understanding of the system, but now they have an understanding of the system. They still come back to these two people and lay their complaints. And these people will definitely then cascade this information up to the local government office, up to the state office, who will go back and validate this information and bring the family back into the register. Now, the other, of course, the other difficulty is the terrain. We have loads and loads and loads and loads of challenges in access. But the good thing about the social register is before we undertake the registering the communities, we do what you call community ranking and profiling. So in the social register, it's not only the number of people that are in the register. You have what is available in the community. You have how do you access a community? What kind of roads, whether rural, whether footpath, third road. You have all sorts of information. You have closeness to banks, whether there's availability of schools there, what kind of water source that particular community has, etc. So we rank these communities that then categorizes from the poor to the poorest. So we start from the poorest communities.
Mr. Aprea, I'm sorry if I have to interrupt you here, but the question in all of this that you say you're doing or your office is doing, I know that Mr. Adebusoye wants to come in here, but real quick answer, and see if you can answer this. What is the value? Because that's another side. Would you say this registration or this coordinating of the most vulnerable people in the country is successful if, for instance, we're not sure of the exact population of the country? Yes, you talked about 13.8 million individuals in the social safety net register as of now, and that's still being ramped up. But if we're not sure of the population and the monetary value of what each individual requires to say their welfare is taken care of, if we're not certain of these figures, can we say this project is being successful?
Yes, because it is hugely so. And there are loads of success stories out there. If you do a process of dietary conditions or what minimal a family needs to provide food per month ranges between 3,500 to 5,000 naira. And now people will argue with that, but it's indeed true using empirical evidence and data to calculate. Now, the federal government is running the cash transfer program. At the moment, the cash transfer program is paying 1 million families out of the social register. Now, these families get 5,000 naira every month, but will pay in 2 month cycle of 10,000 naira every two months. And effectively, when the COVID-19 outbreak, we had the president direct that quickly this cash transfer should be made out and also paid in advance. And the government, the cash transfer office then went ahead to pay 20,000 naira to these families. Now, the government is also saying that effectively we want to ramp up the social register, but also develop a rapid response register that would then target the urban poor, those who are, you could call, who are made poor as a result of the pandemic, mostly seasonal income earners or those who earn daily, like artisans, transport drivers, etc. The government is now developing a rapid response register that will target them using existing databases of the telcos, the banks, etc. To then get to those people. So effectively and directly to answer your question, it has been very, very effective. For over 2 years now that the cash transfer has been paying poor and vulnerable homes, there are success stories. And if you go to the information site for the cash transfer office, you'll find this. Yes, we need to do more in putting this to the public domain in terms of our communication, and we're doing our very best. We will continue to do so, but it has been very effective and efficient so far.
Well, very good point. That where a situation where we're not even sure. The last time we had the census was about 14 years ago, and counting, and we're not even sure of how many people we are, total. We have wild estimates, 200 million plus. So how do we begin to plan when even the basic population, total population, is still something which is up for anybody's guess? I think we need to be careful when we start to evaluate ourselves as government. Let your beneficiaries or proposed beneficiaries evaluate you. Then we can have a clearer picture of what's happening. What's really on ground is that, for instance, I gave the example, some of our partners, the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, JONAPID, which consists of like the most vulnerable, we could say. They don't know. They have not been registered. They're here. They're in Lagos. They're people we can speak to. And there are many like that, the most vulnerable in the rural areas, and even in Lagos and in various parts of the Southwest. That I'm feeling, yes, something is happening, but it's compared to what we have, the magnitude of what we have. We hear how we've become the poverty capital of the whole world, and we've seen the latest study, 83 million people, and that's from the survey. We don't know really how much we really have, but at least 83 million people we're talking about at poverty level. So we need to be very, very careful about the interventions we're doing now. I know that it's a destination. We're not saying they're not working, but let us begin to pool resources. And the federal government should not try and be the Father Christmas. It can't do it. So it really needs to empower and work closely with the states to be able to identify the most vulnerable on an ongoing basis, because what we saw happening many times, especially when they were distributing palliatives, that a lot of times the political class will hijack, various people will hijack, the message will not get down to the beneficiaries. And so it became like, we saw, in social media and everywhere, people would say, oh, this bag is for the whole, community. No, it wasn't meant to be like that. It was meant to be for the most vulnerable, poorest household. But when the message doesn't go through, once you don't involve the structures on ground, the community-based organizations, we have in Lagos State, for instance, the community development associations, who are supposed to be very strong, but they need to be integrated into governance. Governance needs to be bottom up, not top bottom. So what federal government needs to do is begin to seed all these, a lot of what it's doing, especially with regards to funding, direct funding, because that's where a lot of blockages come. Let the state and local governments be the ones to actually get this going, and let federal governments regulate things. Let them be able to regulate things, maybe help bring partners in. But when you now try and hold, of course, you could say they had to do something better than nothing. And yes, I'm sure those who benefited from that would appreciate something. But for it to be sustainable, because what we're looking at is sustainability, let us bring all the actors on board from the local and state level. Federal should just coordinate it, regulate it. And that's where you'll get effective results on a sustainable level.
Okay, Mr. Aprea, in closing, how do we reduce that index, 40.01%? How do we reduce that? And what time frame would you say you have to reduce that number?
There has to be a holistic approach to investment in human capital development of Nigeria. The cash transfer on itself cannot effectively lift people out of poverty to contribute to that, but it has to be a whole basket of interventions under social protection, using social protection as an effective strategy. You need to create jobs. You need to invest in education. So the basic human capital structures of health, job creation, agriculture needs to be invested in. And the government is actually paying huge attention. I would say one of the most ambitious attempts at poverty alleviation in this country for some time now. You have all the social investment programs investing in the same area of lifting our people out of poverty. You have the National Social Safety Nets programs, the NAPS with the cash transfer doing the same, and all the rest of it. Now, I just want to quickly also say that, contrary to my colleague in the studio's opinion, if you go to the Lagos State Government Planning Office, there is a state office of the State Operations and Coordinating Office. It is headed by Mrs. Adebusoye as the state coordinator. She reports to the permanent secretary of that unit. It's also deliberate that it's a planning unit because that database is the property of the state government, of the Lagos state government. And the Lagos state government is using this data as well to do, to plan effectively for reaching people. Now, also in the social register, you have people living with disability. At the moment, about 393,000 are so far captured in our communities, in about 61,000 communities, like I mentioned earlier. And it's growing. So for every single community, all the vulnerable people that are identified by the community themselves are registered onto the social register. It's a start. We are getting there, and we are growing. With the partnership we're having with the World Bank and other partners, we will certainly get there. Other countries, Brazil took up to over 50 years. They are just around
Aprea, we've got to
60%
go
coverage.
now. Thank you very much, Mr. Apera. You never have enough time when you're discussing things as important as this. But just before we go, Samson Oderinde says prevention is better than cure. Children that cannot be cared for should not be brought into the world. This is the foundation of poverty. Spiritual leaders and lawmakers encouraging many wives, multiple children, should be coerced to preach the realities to their adherents. Thank you.
Denny says, instead of paying these poor households, why not employ them in farms across the nation?
Here, here. Mr. Iowa at Apera National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office, who joined us from Abuja, as well as Mr. Ayo Adebusoye, Secretary General, Nigeria Network of NGOs. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming to share your insights with us this morning. Sunrise will be right back with another interesting conversation. Make sure that you join us.